Good afternoon. This is Cynthia once again coming to you with some thoughts for today. Today's theme is wisdom. But before we get into that subject, I'd like to reflect just for a few minutes on one of the pillars of Careiance. As maybe some of you know, hopefully all of you know, that there are 5 pillars of Careiance that I have chosen as overarching themes under which to plug in concepts of character, strengths, and values that we should have in our life. One of those themes is the pillar of experience. Experience, as I've written in on our website of Careiance website, experience entails or involves drawing on wisdom and spirit, our spirit, perhaps the spirit and the spirit of God, the spirit of the universe, to fully take in all that life has to offer. Not only coming into contact with various aspects of life, but entering into those aspects of life so that we truly draw on those aspects, reflect on them, and learn from them. Experience is the knowledge or at times a mastery of an event or a subject gained through involvement and in it and exposure to it. This is Cynthia Watke, a life transformation coach and transformative healer with Careiance. The primary strengths related to experience are these 6: curiosity, good judgment, wisdom, love of learning, perspective, and creativity. Those are the primary character strengths. Today, I want to talk with you a little bit about wisdom. Wisdom is a word that, of course, shows up in all of the literature of the world religions back thousands and thousands of years. Our fascination with wisdom dates back many thousands of years. Most of the great writers of all time have written at some point about wisdom. Many people throughout all of history have pondered about wisdom. When I was a child, my father took time to read the Proverbs to us, and I carried on that tradition with my children for a period of time to go through the book of Proverbs in the Bible little by little and read just small sections of it each day and talk about the wisdom that there was to be gleaned from those recommendations that King Solomon, who was considered to be the wisest man of all of history, wrote in the book of Proverbs. Here are some of the Proverbs that he wrote, somewhat put into our modern vernacular. Kindness and faithfulness keep a king safe. Through kindness, his throne is made secure. Your own soul is nourished when you are kind. It is destroyed when you are cruel. In the day of prosperity, be joyful. But in the day of adversity, consider. Who is a wise person? The person who sees what's going on and what is about to be born, what is about to happen. A friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity, or maybe a sister is born for adversity. A merry heart makes a cheerful countenance. A merry heart does good like a medicine. So, how do we define wisdom in our lives? Aristotle believed in 2 types of wisdom: theoretical wisdom and practical wisdom. The theoretical type of wisdom explores the things that we can't change, but about which we seek truth. A practical type of wisdom explores the things that we can change in our lives by making good choices. Wisdom can also be viewed as good judgment in everyday life and seeking knowledge in all things as one is able. Confucius wrote, "By 3 methods we may learn wisdom. First, by reflection, which is noblest. Second, by imitation, which is easiest. And third, by experience, which may be the bitterest." Do we agree with some of these heavy hitters? Solomon, Aristotle, Confucius? Or perhaps we just believe that wisdom will only come with old age. So let's discuss this today. Where does wisdom come from, and how can we acquire wisdom in our lives? When I was in my mid-30s, coming back from South America with a massive change in my life, I began to realize that even though I had so much responsibility with my children, with beginning life over again, with coming into some direction with my life that had nothing to do with being a missionary, starting basically a new career, I also began to realize that I really needed a lot of wisdom. I needed wisdom to be able to figure out how to do all this. I needed wisdom to make good choices. Did I always make good choices? Of course not. But there was a process over 15, 20 years that I just kept working on finding balance and wisdom in my life. A simple definition is very hard to find for wisdom. Even the psychologists in the positive psychology movement have a hard time with that. Some view it as an integration of the forms of knowledge, what we learn, and forms of speech and narrative and story. We can learn from intellectual pursuits, but we can also learn from what we experience in our heart. Some researchers see wisdom as this transcendent quality, something that has a transcendent quality. I tend to believe that wisdom, in its purest form, comes from God. There's a transcendent quality to wisdom. Having an openness in our hearts to allow the wisdom of God, the wisdom that we look for, to come through us, to come to us, not just struggling for it, but to be open to wrestle with life's greatest questions, but turn those questions over in a very open manner to God, to the universe, to find something from without us, something that's outside of us, a transcendent quality that might bring us some wisdom, something that's outside of ourselves to grow within. Positive psychologists are constantly exploring what it means to be wise. They're very curious about how wisdom affects our well-being. When we have a hard time making good choices or making any choice at all because we lack wisdom, our well-being is affected. Our stress levels are higher. Our health is affected. By definition, wisdom is really hard to get a handle on. We know what wisdom isn't. Bad choices, wrong direction in life, hateful attitudes, unkindness, but it's really hard sometimes to figure out what is the wise direction? How do we grow in wisdom? Some people believe that you are not going to be wise until you're much older and that it's just going to somehow automatically happen. And research has found that the cusp of wisdom where someone finally really becomes a wise person is around age 60. But I don't believe that that is necessarily true. Because if we learn much younger, even as a child, even as a teenager, to draw on principles of wisdom, to draw on the wisdom that comes from God, to be open for an enlightening thought, a transcendent quality in our life, no matter what age we are, we may be able to have wisdom to make good decisions, wisdom to live our lives in a healthy, wholesome manner. The psychologists, of course, have continued and continued to research on how wisdom works in our lives. One psychologist, Robert Steinberg, has a balance theory of wisdom. He defines wisdom as using one's intelligence, creativity, common sense, and knowledge to balance three areas of life. And those three areas of life are interpersonal, intrapersonal, and extrapersonal interests. So, over the long term, people can use their intelligence and their creativity, their common sense and knowledge to grow in their wisdom in an interpersonal, that's inside themselves and their close relationships, intrapersonal, outside of themselves, and extrapersonal interests. Another researcher views wisdom as integrating the cognitive, the reflective, and our personality traits, our personality characteristics. One of the things that I encourage with my coaching clients is for them to take an assessment from the VIA Institute of Character Strengths. The Character Strengths Assessment is an assessment of 24 character strengths that allows a person to see what are the strengths that they operate in. And there's an overarching 5 virtues, which I have correlated to our 5 Careiance Pillars. One of those virtues is wisdom, which is the drawing on wisdom in our lives that we can experience life in a full way. This is a noble trait, a noble virtue. Wisdom is something that many people do appreciate in others and wish to have more of themselves. There are 5 strengths that fall definitely under this wisdom category, under this wisdom umbrella, and those are creativity, curiosity, good judgment, love of learning, and perspective. Over the next 5 live at noon that we're going to have in the next few days and on into next week, we're going to explore these subjects of curiosity, creativity, love of learning, perspective, and good judgment. Every one of these strengths are part of each one of us. Within our personhood, we do have these strengths to varying degrees, and we can learn to draw on those strengths even more so as we work to develop balance in our lives, and to develop wisdom. We can increase in these strengths as we learn to use them more. Creativity, like wisdom, is a little bit hard to define, and we'll talk more about that tomorrow. Curiosity is something that I definitely have in spades. I take an interest in other subjects. I'm always curious about what people are thinking or doing or living, how they're living their lives. I'm always researching and trying to find out more about some subject of which I have developed a curiosity. Good judgment, of course, is very important in our lives. Without good judgment, it's difficult to make a good choice. And it's also difficult to be open-minded and use critical thinking. Good judgment is thinking things through. The love of learning, of course, is another very important part of wisdom. Formal or informal education, it doesn't matter. We can continue to love to learn. When my children were young, I always encouraged them that it wasn't enough just to go through their schoolwork and do their schoolwork to a mediocre level or even their best. But more importantly, I wanted them to love to learn. I wanted them to learn a love of learning so that no matter what happened in their lives, as they grew up, they would continue to love to learn. I hope that I instilled that in them. I know I have that in spades too, because I love to learn something new. I like to learn new things, and I honestly will do what it takes to learn how to do a task correctly because I believe that learning is a positive experience. Another aspect of wisdom is perspective. Perspective is the trademark for wise counsel. Without perspective, the ability to see the world as it really is and see our own role as well as the role of others, we can't have perspective. Having perspective can make a big difference in our choices. Perspective, creativity, curiosity, love of learning, and good judgment all make up the aspects of wisdom, the experience of living our lives in a way that brings joy to us, brings compassion to ourselves and to others, living our lives in a way that is expansive, that brings great learning and great direction for all of our choices, that builds our relationships, that helps us to have a communication with God, to have a communication with others, to be balanced in our lives. So, again, this is Cynthia Watke, a life transformation coach and transformative healer with Careiance. I appreciate your joining me today, and I trust that you will have a wonderful Thanksgiving season and that you'll join me again tomorrow. Have a blessed day. Thank you.